Hey everyone, this is Jack from the Cardboard Herald, and today we are doing a review of the new release by Milan Tezevsky and Arcana Games, Small Samurai Empires. And so, as usual, let's start by talking about what is this game. So, Small Samurai Empires is an area control game which, as you might guess from the title or from the box, is set in feudal Japan, in which you are utilizing your samurai warriors in order to collect the most points by the end of 3 eras. The interesting thing about the game, though, is that it is an action programming and hidden action selection game, meaning that you are going to, at the beginning of a round, set out all of your different actions and then resolve them. In this case, having a really fascinating programming component where you are resolving them in linear order from the south of the Japanese archipelagos all the way to the north, and then each of the 3 eras has a second stage in which you are then putting out more actions and then resolving all the actions from north down to south, then determining points for the round, do 3 rounds, and then determine the winner. So what makes this game so cool? Well, first off, this action selection system, the resolution system, is bonkers and so incredibly good. It makes for so many interesting decisions as you're putting out your actions. Now, another favorite thing of mine is how simple the actions are. In a lot of ways, it feels kind of like an old school game, and it's kind of refreshing that things just happen directly. See, each of the action depots, we'll say, there's a couple action slots that you can assign these to, correspond to different regions on the board, and each region has several territories. When you put your action down, you immediately get whatever little minor bonus action is, and then when you're in the resolution phase, when it comes to that action spot, you flip the token face up and then resolve whatever the token says to do. And those actions are really simple. You can either move dudes in that region, kill dudes in that region opposing your dudes. You can make castles, which increase your influence round by round in that region. You can add dudes, and then you can also take harvested food and bushido, which can be used to amplify the potency of the various actions. So what this actually translates into is this really precarious balance that you have to make when deciding what actions you want to take. The linear resolution, not only just in the programming sense, but also in how that corresponds to the different regions on the board, means you're going to be thinking about, do I want to go earlier? Do I want to have 2 actions that resolve in the same region? What minor action that resolves immediately associated with placing your disc do you want to take? There's a push and pull of expectation of what your opponents are going to do, what you want to capitalize on, and then when you really want to have the last say on timing, because going first and going with the absolute last space in each of the 2 phases during each of the 3 eras is really powerful. Furthermore, there aren't enough spaces to account for everyone's discs on the board. Yes, during the first phase of each era, there will be a few spaces left over, but when you go back to do the north to south action selection and resolution, you're actually going to have to put tokens down either on top of your own tokens, any leftover available empty spaces, or potentially on top of opponents' actions, which you have to spend some resources to do. What this means is you're thinking about which of your opponents' actions you want to deny them by putting your token down on top of them, and which ones you're going to let continue into that back half of the round. In a lesser game where the actions themselves are much more complicated, this would be far too much to account for, but the simplicity works so much in its favor. Every single action token you place and every single action token that you resolve feels like it has real meaningful impact on everything happening in the game, which is awesome. Another thing that I really love that's just such a brilliant flourish in the game is that at the beginning of each of those 3 eras, the kind of binary established rounds, players are going to play one of their destiny cards from hand. And these are just little tiny cards that then augment the potency of the regions on the board. Every region gives you points if you have the most territories within it controlled at the end of the round, but also those territories that you control increase your influence. And then at the end of the game, you're going to take the amount of influence that you've acquired, and that's going to give you a certain static number that you're going to multiply by the amount of destiny cards corresponding to that region that have been played by anyone throughout the game. And because you have to play a destiny card and you only have so many to choose from, you're actually kind of telegraphing what regions you're hoping to become more worthwhile as you play the game. It gives a lot of agency, but also shares some information. It's, again, just a really simplistic and elegant solution to giving players a dynamic avenue through which they can control the point interaction in the game. The last thing that I think is particularly notable about this is, for being a game that has small in the title, which to me reflects sort of an irony or at least a playfulness, I was kind of expecting that this would be overly cutesy. And don't get me wrong, the little tiny meeples that are shaped individually for each of the factions are adorable. But this game, it plays it straight, surprisingly straight, in a reserved sort of sense that gives it a beautiful presence on the table. Yes, it's small, but instead of coming across as tiny to the point of it being unwieldy for big-handed people like me, it feels more concise, and I think that really works to its strengths. As far as what didn't work, now, I do really like this game. It made an incredibly favorable impression for me, but I did feel like there wasn't that much long-term strategy that you could kind of cling onto, which is a big dynamic of area control games for me, by making it a point-based system in which points are going to come from several different avenues, including all the variants that are able to be added to the game, which are cool variants. I feel like they kind of remove you from having a long-term storied goal, and instead you're looking at short-term tactical point grabs, which still feels cool for decision making, but it makes it more of a homogenized experience from game to game to game, because you aren't really leaning into unique paths to victory. Likewise, by not having a sort of upgrade system for you personally as a faction, everyone has exactly the same tokens, there's no sort of asymmetry, and there's no real development that you can latch onto throughout the game. You can't purchase from a market to switch out your tokens. It doesn't really give a sense of identity to yourself. What that does is it just emphasizes the abstract strategy aspect of the game, which is quite good, but it leaves a lot of thematic immersion on the table, as well as some nuance that could be applied to strategy. If they were to do an expansion to this down the road, I'd like to see something like that, where you as a player could spend some of those tokens that you've acquired throughout the game and maybe trade out a token for a slightly more powerful version of it, so you feel like this isn't just a army that you're playing, this is your army. But all that aside, this is such a beautifully done game, and the linear action system, as I said, I think is bonkers in how well it works for this sort of point-based area control game. It makes it a very intuitive but incredibly crunchy game that gives you so much potency of decisions and the ramifications. Sure, you're not going to feel Machiavellian that a plan has finally come to pass by the end of the game, but each turn you are feeling like you're trying to undermine your opponent and further emphasize what you are currently going for, and it feels really good to resolve. This is my first time reviewing anything by this publisher and designer, and I gotta say, it was a fantastic first impression by Milan and Arcana Games. And that's our review. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.